freedom, passed from hand to yearning hand, and the vision of our fathers spread hope throughout this land, as the dream some fought and died for in my heart becomes my own. I will strive to keep her promise, America, my home. America, America, may God bless America, and freedom reign across America, my home. From the shorelines to the prairies, to the cities great and small, we have reaped the fruits of justice and liberty for all. So with deep appreciation for the blessings of freedom that we know in this great and wonderful land of ours, I'm Dr. George Simon, welcoming you to another edition of Character Matters. This is the program where we talk about what I consider to be the defining issue of our time, the character crisis that we face, and the impact that it's had on all of our lives in so many areas of our lives, and what we can do about it. And if you want to join the conversation, we have a good topic for today. If you want to join the conversation, you just have a question you want to ask or something you want to contribute, give us a call at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. For those of us here in the United States, it's been a holiday weekend, the Thanksgiving holiday, a traditional time to count our blessings, so to speak, and to take note of all that we have to be grateful for. And most typically that involves family and friends and celebrations with family and friends. And that's exactly what my family did this weekend. I hope yours did as well. And I hope that all of you in the listening audience had a wonderful and fulfilling time with family and friends, and that your lives are full of abundant blessings, and that you recognize and appreciate those blessings, and found good cause this past weekend to give thanks. This program is going to be dedicated to that very topic. We're going to be talking about gratitude and its role in promoting psychological health and all of the many things that we do have to be grateful for. And if you have something you want to contribute to that discussion, as I said moments ago, give us a call at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. I'll be happy to take your call. Well, you know, the news cycle is such that, some of the terrible events over the past couple of weeks that have occurred have died down in sensationalism, so to speak, on the major news outlets, and people had time to take a breath and to take note of all that we have to be grateful for, and to celebrate with family and friends. And I did so, and it doesn't take much for me to call to mind how many things that I have to be grateful for. And you know the premise of this program is that character matters, perhaps more than anything else, to our welfare. Because without character in individuals, we can't do the kinds of things or build the kinds of societies that promote true prosperity and true welfare among people. We just can't do it. It all depends on character. And of all the institutions that mankind has devised, perhaps there's no greater institution. Some would argue this. I don't know why some would, but some would argue this. There's no greater institution than a healthy, and I'm qualifying here, a healthy, intact family to help individuals grow and develop and mature in character. Now, I know that many believe, and rightly so, that it also takes a village, takes a society, well structured, founded on certain traditions and principles that promote character, to engender and sustain the kind of character in individuals that build great societies. But at the root of it all is a healthy, intact family system. Why intact? Well, one of the things that we know, even though divorce has become so commonplace today, one of the things that we know is that emotional bonding between parents and children and between siblings, emotional bonding is key, is absolutely key to developing the kinds of sentiments that will help us forge our character. I see we have a caller calling in. I'm going to take this call. Hello, and welcome to Character Matters. Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Hello, and welcome to Character Matters.
Thank you. Am I the only person on the call?
You are at the moment.
Oh, okay.
And what would you like to talk about?
Well, my name is Joni. I live in Indiana, and I recently resigned from a job because I had a subordinate that worked for me, but unfortunately I hired 2.5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And just was one of these individuals that built a profile of herself as warm, caring, vulnerable, sweet, committed, productive, and the entire organization sort of had that impression of her. As her boss, I was having a very different experience. I was having an experience of kind of no matter what I gave her as far as direction, she'd sort of smile and give me tidbits of kind of resolving whatever problem I asked her to resolve or whatever. But she really was, I could tell by the look on her face. She had no intention of doing what I said, and it just went on and on and on. And after about in the past year, I really started to catch on to a lot of things. Just in one-on-one conversations with her, I felt like I was going crazy because she had two looks on her face. One was kind of good luck with that, that I was clear she had no intention on fulfilling anything that I needed her to fulfill on. And the second was an absolute blank stare that used to just kind of give me, not kind of, but gave me chills.
Uh-huh.
and really had me feeling like I was going crazy. So
Might I interrupt you for just a second or two?
sure, yes,
This story sounds so remarkably like a vignette that I present in my book, In Sheep's Clothing. Have you read that book? And
I did. I listened to it. I actually listened to it a couple of times, and I just finished the character disturbance book. And I got to tell you, man, I had fireworks of light bulbs going off in my head, and I can't thank you enough for having read the book. I finally fired the woman in late August, and she went to the owners of our company and caused a big stink. And a week later, they hired her back behind my back.
Well, I just wanted to ask you a question about it because
Sure.
this scene you paint sounds so eerily similar to this one vignette in Sheep's Clothing, with this woman in this organization who had the art of impression management
Right.
down to a science, and came across on the surface at least at first to folks as well-meaning, intentioned, would do anything for the company, et cetera, et cetera. But one key thing that kind of gave her character away is that she never really could submit herself to anyone's authoritative direction. And that's what you're describing here. So
Right.
I was just kind of curious about that.
Well, what I'm curious about, and here's where my question is,
Okay.
do these folks, I mean, as her boss, I mean, I felt like I really felt like I was going crazy. And it was something that the one person that started to kind of make me feel a little bit less crazy, like I was putting my finger on something, was my assistant, who also started to see a bit of the craziness.
Mm-hmm.
But she's only 24 years old, and this was kind of, she just knew I was stressed out. But will this individual, I mean, I left the company under duress and kind of under a bit of drama, which is not my way of doing things.
Uh-huh.
But now will others, I'm just wondering, will she need to then play a game with someone else? Because as her boss, I was the only one seeing this.
Yeah. Well, one of two things will happen, and it's really hard to predict which of these two will occur, because it depends a lot on the culture within the organization.
Mm-hmm.
But one of two things will happen. People who stop at nothing, people who don't submit to any authoritative direction, and who have the capacity for charm and putting on these impressions, making these good impressions, but who are determined to have things their way, determined to win, who are primarily out for themselves. These folks will eventually step on enough folks and create enough ill will that they're seen for who they are. But the other alternative is, if the corporate culture actually embraces and finds room for such folks, in other words, if the organization has kind of a cutthroat character of its own, many times these individuals rise to the inner circle of mutual adorers, so to speak, who have the same character type. So you never know how it's going to go. Suffice it to say that you probably realized this was not the place for you, right?
Well, absolutely not. I mean, first of all, I was not going to, I had already made the decision that I was not going to be inside of an organization that she was inside of.
Yeah.
And second of all, I mean, I was a senior executive. The mere fact that they hired her back behind me with, sort of publicly cutting out my credibility.
So you were undermined twice. You were not only undermined in your attempt to give authoritative direction to your subordinate, but then you were undermined again when you finally set a limit, and then the company in turn reversed that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
I was devastated. I moved to Indianapolis for this job, and I'm now going to have to move out. I mean, I'm not going to stay here.
Yeah.
I'll be moving someplace else, but I just thought, oh man, this is crazy. And I really have to thank you for your books. I've recommended your book to like 6 people already, The Character Disturbance. And I've been talking about it enthusiastically over the recent holiday to everybody I could talk to. And I just happened upon this forum that you had on your website like 5 minutes ago. So I quickly called in. I thought, well, I'm going to listen to what's going on.
Are you talking about the blog at manipulative-people.com?
Yes, yes. I finished Character Disturbance, and I thought, well, I want to see what else he's written. Maybe he's got a blog or something. So I did find your website, and that's why I just called in. I thought, man, this is a stroke of luck.
Well, thank you. And this is the weekend for gratitude. So let me express some gratitude to you, because frankly, you just gave about the best kind of advertising that I could possibly have. This is how it's worked for me for the better of 20 years. It's one individual feeling validated, having that light bulb go off, not feeling crazy anymore, and then telling somebody else. And that's how my resources have been found all over the world. In Sheep's Clothing is now going to be published in its 15th foreign language. That's
outstanding.
This would never have happened were it not for one person telling another, just like that. So I'm grateful to you, actually, and I wanted to say that.
Well, it's mutual, and I'm very committed. My life's work is that of holding high standards and helping leaders develop, and the whole notion that our society and our organizations and our families and whatever are paying homage and creating situations where folks like this are gaining power and more power just makes me sick.
You touch on the key factor there, and I'm afraid that's a trend that's going to continue to escalate for a while, and that is power for its own sake, even within organizations. And there's going to be an adverse consequence to this. It seems like we never really learn until those adverse consequences set in. But we can't continue on the path that we're presently on with respect to the way a lot of our corporate environments and other organizational environments operate. When power is the end in itself, when money and influence are the ends in itself, and it's not about serving needs, and it's not about integrity of character on the job, inevitably, things come crashing down. In the end, we do ourselves in. And I'm afraid we haven't learned very much from past experience, so we have to learn these lessons over and over again. It's just the way the human condition is. It will take some time, though.
I suppose. I particularly wanted to call in to find out if you've had many instances. I did identify with the vignette in Sheep's Clothing about the woman, but I was wondering if you had heard of many instances where a boss was undermined by a subordinate.
Oh, absolutely. And many times, manipulative people who are, who basically wear that face, who wear that social face that says that they are going to be accommodating, that they have your best interests at heart, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, when all the time underneath they're looking for ways to undermine you. Many times these folks are good at cultivating allies, and so they not only undermine their bosses, but they create support influences within their organizations and rise to the top. So, like I said, one of two things will happen with a person like this. Either she'll step on enough toes, she'll hurt enough people, she'll leave enough bodies in her wake, she'll upset enough people, or that she will be exposed for the kind of individual she is, and she will no longer be, she'll become persona non grata, basically. Or, if the corporate culture actually is embracing of these kinds of folks, she will rise to the elite, and she'll be among the the core power brokers of the organization. One of those two things will happen.
Well, this is a family-held business with a very family-type culture, and the reason why she was hired back and my life was made difficult is because I was seen as someone not being kind by holding her that accountable.
Mm. Mm.
And she really managed that profile about me.
Yeah, so she played the victim role well, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, and I take it in your years as a supervisor that you learned the difference between setting necessary limits and being mean to people. So you knew how to enforce boundaries without being unnecessarily cruel.
I would think so. I've never been given feedback that I am cruel. I do hold high standards, but I'm not that kind of boss. I don't rule that. I don't govern that way. I don't teach that way. I don't lead that way. It's not who I am.
Well, so what's next for you, seeing as though this was probably not the environment you needed to be in? What's next?
I have no idea. I don't know. I'm going to generate that going into 2016. I'm going to slide into the holidays and rest and recoup and see where next year takes me.
You know, we're talking tonight about gratitude, and I don't mean to excuse me if I seem to be trivializing your ordeal in any way, but I have had many, many experiences in my life sort of analogous to what you described, where I found myself in a position where I could just no longer be in the place where I was. And at the time, it seemed devastating. It was disheartening to my spirit, and I felt in some ways defeated. But in the end, I ended up feeling so grateful for coming to my senses that was simply not the place to be. And I had no idea at the time that there was going to be so much better a place to be in the future. And if it hadn't happened, that circumstances basically kind of forced the issue and got me out of a bad environment, I might have stayed there.
You're right. I'm sure. I have all the faith that what you're saying is exactly how it's going to play out for me. I'm not concerned. I will tell you that your books helped tremendously. I had initially been, and I really got some very clear distinctions from your books. I initially went on YouTube and started trying to find videos that would resonate for me, mostly around the topic of narcissism, and then I got the distinction of covert narcissism because this woman is very much if you met her, you would find her very gracious and just lovely, and you almost want to take her home for dinner.
Yeah.
But then the covert narcissism sort of led me to your work. I forget exactly the pattern of research or the path of research that I went on, but that's when I got onto your stuff just a couple of weeks ago. And just in my process of attempting to heal from this, because I appreciate you noticing that it was a double betrayal.
It's the covert nature of these behaviors. I don't mean to interrupt again, but I want to make sure the audience understands. You mentioned that crazy feeling before.
Yes.
And it's the covert nature of these behaviors that makes you feel crazy, because on the surface, you can't point to anything that anybody else would objectively see that explains the bad feeling you have in your gut. At the gut level, there's something up with this person. You know that there's a hidden agenda. You know that there's a degree of ruthlessness, a refusal to submit, and all these other things going on. You feel this in your gut. But when you try to point to anything on the surface, objective, that anybody else would see, you have a hard time doing it. So that makes you feel crazy, and it makes you doubt your perceptions. It's a really bad place to be in. That's the main reason I wrote the book.
Well, it, like I said, I got a ton out of it because I struggled with even my decision to fire her because I knew there would be a systemic reaction of, what are you doing? I mean, she's lovely. She's great.
Yeah.
What are you doing? What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I felt like I needed to do it. I kept calling it to myself and to people around me that I was explaining it to. I was like, there's just a high ick factor.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I had 9 people on my team, and she was starting to suckle my energy because I kept wanting to pay attention to get distinctions for myself as to why this was making me so crazy.
Mm-hmm. Did you get the feeling that she was not only gunning for you, but gunning for your job?
She's not qualified for my job, so in her mind, she might be, but I suppose she might be, but that's a level of responsibility I don't think she would want. But she was getting kind of destructive on my team. She really undermined my authority with a number of people on my team. I mean, she was really trying to sort of break down their listening of me.
Mm-hmm. So she wasn't gunning for you in particular. She was just looking to self-advance.
I think so, and I think she wanted me out of the picture because I think she knew I was becoming smart enough to see through her. I think she knew I wasn't easily fooled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And she had seen me fire 2 other people for character issues.
Well, based on the number of times that this has happened to me, you know, and I'm a person who sometimes doesn't take my own medicine very well and doesn't learn my own lessons all that well. But if history is any teacher, I'm trusting that the day will come for you that you will look back at this and you will be thanking your stars that this came about, and that you're onward and upward to a much better place as a result of what had to transpire here.
Well, I'm sure I'll be fine. One thing that I noticed I have feelings of wanting revenge, and that's not productive.
Or no, and it's not only not productive, but it does no good with respect to confronting and correcting these kinds of behaviors anyway. So
I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm just noticing that there's some healing for me that is still left because I still have those feelings of wanting to celebrate her going down.
Yeah, sure. It's natural. When you've been wounded, it's pretty human to want to wound back. But I'm trusting that in time you'll have some real gratitude for this opportunity. If in fact, I mean, no matter which way it goes in this organization, if it's going to take a lot of people being fooled and abused in the process to the point where they finally see through it all and are sick and tired of it, or if it's the kind of organization that is going to embrace this kind of behavior, in the end, folks get exactly what they deserve. So you're probably better off. And my guess is, given your resources and your experience, how long have you been actively involved in the business world?
30 years.
With your experience, my guess is that this was just the impetus you needed to move to a new level in your career, and you'll look back at it and you'll say, "Boy, am I glad that happened." But maybe not just yet.
Well, I'm getting there, and your book's helped.
Well, that's great. I'm happy to hear it. Well, I hope you had a wonderful holiday, and I hope that in addition to the gratitude that you may have for all the other things in your life, that the time will come a couple of years from now, you'll call in and say, "Boy, am I grateful that even this transpired." So,
thank you very much.
You're so welcome. Thanks for the call.
Okay.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Mm-hmm.
Well, indeed, the caller talks about a situation that I have in my professional life experience so often. I have to tell you, in the very early days of my work, and it's like this when a paradigm shift is on the horizon, but the social or occupational or vocational climate is not quite there yet to embrace the paradigm shift. It's like this often. But when I was first starting out in my professional career, and I was dealing with problems for which I thought I was adequately trained, but I quickly realized that no one was adequately trained because they weren't of the nature that we were taught problems were. Professionals, by and large, in the age in which I was trained, were taught to pay attention to people's unconscious fears, insecurities, the things that had them basically riddled with worry and fret and were causing them inner distress. And we were taught how to address these kinds of problems and how to basically make people better, how to help make people get better. Well, then I was thrust into several environments in which the vast majority of people were not suffering from these kinds of problems. Instead, they were suffering they weren't suffering at all. Many of the times, they weren't the active sufferers. One of the first places that I worked was an inpatient facility, the dominant wing of which, there were two dominant wings of this facility. One housed chronic substance abusers whose lives were a continual mess and who had failed various forms of intervention and were considered high recidivism individuals. And then the other dominant population in the facility were adolescents with behavior disorders. Now, I'll back that up. Some of these young people were basically okay characters in significant distress related to their unfortunate family circumstances or other environmental factors. But the vast majority were budding character disorders who were already showing significant disturbances of character, who harbored attitudes of entitlement, who lacked empathy, who felt no compunction about doing things that exploited or abused others, and whose families were not all that dysfunctional at all, but had tried to give them the best of everything and tried to do right for them and also done the best that they could to rear them. And I quickly learned that all of the methods that I was taught to help people deal with fears and insecurities and overcome unconscious conflicts were totally useless in dealing with these folks. And we were, as I mentioned before, we were just on the verge of a paradigm shift where we would finally take into account people's behavior patterns and especially their thinking patterns and attitudes. It was unthinkable at the time that I first started shifting my perspective. It was unthinkable among most professionals to think about confronting a person directly about the way they thought about something or about an attitude that they held. You were supposed to be unconditionally positively regarding of the individual. Make no value judgments at all. Make no judgments whatsoever on their belief system or their value system. That was unthinkable. It was even regarded by many as malpractice. So as I began to change my perspective, and I also began to change the ways I was trying to intervene, because, forgive me, but I was looking for something that many of my colleagues were content not to see. And that was, I was looking for results, change. I was actually looking to see that the individuals that I was dealing with, who were wreaking havoc in people's lives, would do better, would actually change. I was not looking to do there now therapy. I was looking to promote change. And at the time, this was radical. So, I didn't win a lot of friends in the early days. As a matter of fact, I butted heads quite a bit. But times changed. Over 20 years or so, the perspective began to shift. More and more individuals, more researchers, more and more therapists and clinicians in the field, more and more professionals from all disciplines were beginning to see the need for a shift of the paradigm. And it wasn't too long after I started doing professional training workshops that the attitudes among professionals were much different. And the reception that I got to the perspective that I was offering was much different. But it wasn't always like that. And sometimes I found myself in a situation where I just could no longer deal with the environment. And at the time, it seemed devastating. It seemed like rejection. It seemed like failure. That's how it seemed at the time. Only later would I have, and here's that key word, the gratitude. And this is the weekend for counting blessings. I am so grateful for all of those events that have occurred in my life that at the time seemed like disasters. Because they have done two things that I could not possibly be more grateful for today. They helped me take stock of myself and further hone my own character. And in the process, they led me to a better place. You know, when we reckon honestly, that's the key word. When we really reckon honestly with the things that happen to us, even the seemingly catastrophic things, when we reckon with them honestly, it's character building. And it's personal development building on an even grander scale. We come to appreciate we come to appreciate our fullest potential. It doesn't seem so at the time. At the time, just like the caller a moment ago or some time ago was describing, at the time, it seems like a personal defeat. But it's not. It rarely is. It depends on how you reflect upon it and what you take away from it. And the takeaway that I've had from so many of these kinds of experiences, that it's all about personal growth and development. That's what it's all about. And in my book, The Judas Syndrome, I make the point that the same thing applies to our spiritual development, which is why our faith is so crucial. A caller moments ago mentioned the faith that she has. And I have no idea whether it's a religiously based faith or not. But I do know that faith is instrumental. It is key to that kind of personal development. If growth is what we're after, then failure takes on an entirely different color. One of the hallmarks of character disturbance is that it doesn't appear that the disturbed character has the capacity to profit or learn from their mistakes. As a matter of fact, that's one of the defining or appears to be a defining characteristic of the disturbed character. In fact, we know that disturbed characters do learn. But unfortunately, they don't learn the kind of lessons we want them to learn. But it appears like they don't learn from experience because they don't, when they are reflecting upon things, first of all, they don't reflect honestly about things. They maintain their distorted views about things. And secondly, they don't commit themselves to the necessity for change. Most of the time, the reason that they won't do that is because they're not of a mind, they don't have the sentiment to do the work of change. Growth necessarily involves change, and change is hard work. Anybody that's ever made a significant change, say of career, especially at a more advanced age, to change a career many times involves pulling up roots, maybe even moving locations, adapting to a new environment, perhaps going back to school, or otherwise finding some venue to learn new skills, hone those skills, prepare oneself for a different type of work. This is all very labor-intensive and energy-draining. And one thing that disturbed characters and other character-impaired individuals don't want to do is face that four-letter word, W-O-R-K, and embrace it. In their sense of entitlement, and in their disdain, They just can't bring themselves to do the work of self-improvement. Besides, in their vanity, they already think they're great. As one of the pioneers in the field that revolutionized psychology once said, they are legends in their own minds. So they don't really see the need to change, because according to them and their appraisal of themselves, they've got it all together. So, it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that it's taken us this long within the helping professions to realize how misguided some of our notions were about how to address what has become the defining phenomenon of our time. More and more individuals today have problems that are considered mental health problems, not primarily because they have some brain disease process at work or other biochemical abnormality at work, but because their character is so poorly developed that they don't cope, or they cause problems, or they engage in abusive and exploitative behaviors, even self-destructive behaviors. That's become the phenomenon of our time. It's become the defining issue of our time, the dominant, the much more prevalent issue facing mental health professionals of all types. Professional counselors, social workers, marriage and family therapists. Unfortunately, there are still too many professionals out there who not only don't get it, but are also still overly aligned with traditional perspectives. I can't tell you the number of times that I have done, I sometimes do collateral case consultations with therapists who are struggling because they are not versed in the appropriate methodology for dealing with impaired characters. So they've got a disturbed character they're working with, and they're having a time of it. And so I do these consultations, and I can't tell you how often, because they're stuck in this model of insight-oriented psychotherapy, that they're working with somebody to try to get them to, quote-unquote, see the misguided nature of some of their ways. And they really think that if they work hard enough at it, that they can get the person to see what it is they believe the person doesn't see. Buying into the model that these folks basically don't know what they're doing, that they're unconsciously motivated so much of the time, and that there are fears and insecurities underlying those unconscious motives, and therefore they need to be made to see what's really going on. So they do this to utter futility. And so in my consultations, I will, in one way or another, help them to see that their client is not having a problem with awareness. It's not that they're not aware. It's not that they don't see. But that they disagree with the principles of conduct that would help them function better in life. They've taken a stance and embraced it to dealing with life and its circumstances that causes trouble. They've adopted beliefs and ways of thinking and attitudes that are problematic. And those things need to be confronted and corrected directly. And as soon as the therapists get on that page, get on that wavelength, then their clients begin to show some improvement. Now, it's not an easy thing. This work is not easy work. But I am grateful that over the years, I started my new kind of work back in 1988. And I wrote the first edition of In Sheep's Clothing in 1996. Actually, I take that back. The very first edition was a spiral-bound, kind of homemade manual that I started taking to workshops in 1995. And soon after that, I developed a paperback version, a trade paperback version that was first published in 1996. And that version was revised and reprinted several times. And after the 10-year anniversary edition and revision, a new edition was sold to an independent publisher, and that's the version that is popular today and has been translated into so many languages. So I am so grateful. I am so grateful because word of mouth from individuals, one to another, recommending not just In Sheep's Clothing, but also Character Disturbance and the Judas Syndrome, word of mouth recommendation of my books and of my blog at manipulative-people.com and my other articles at counselingwith2lsresource.com. Word of mouth and goodwill among readers of my material has made all the difference for me, changed my life, changed my career. Gave me a voice. Let me be an instrument of the reform that the field so badly needed. Help me be part of a larger paradigm shift within the mental health professions. Now, it's not like other conditions don't exist. Don't get me wrong. I've seen my fair share of individuals who are neurologically or developmentally impaired, etc., and who need many kinds of different interventions to help them with their difficulties. I've also seen individuals who basically would be fine were it not for the truly horrendous and unfortunate circumstances in which they find themselves or under which they were raised. I'm grateful that that was not the case for me. I had many good teachers. I had parents who loved each other and stayed together, who had their disagreements but were never crosswise with one another, who taught us mutual respect, who raised a large family that was a breeding grounds for socialization and character development. I also attended a school in which the primary purpose was to have our education form our character. So we weren't just taught all the subjects that we needed to know. We had to learn them, to be sure, because there was no fudging on the grading system. The standards were high. But the purpose was to emerge a decent human being, capable of doing an equally good job of creating a lasting relationship with a life partner, raising a family, and helping build a community. That was the focus. And I was the recipient of all that good nurturing. And I must say, I didn't always appreciate that. But today, I live in unending gratitude for all of it. So, even though they are both deceased, big thanks to Mom and Dad. Too bad your son has to be so grateful now that you're not around to hear him say it in person, but I know that you are somewhere. And to all those who taught me not just what I needed to know to get by in life, but taught me the essential values that I needed, the non-academic values, the character-building values. To all of those who were instrumental in that, a debt of gratitude to you also. So, on this weekend of giving thanks, perhaps all of us should take some time to once again count our blessings. We live in a great land, a land of still boundless opportunity that still has an incredible amount of freedom. And in our gratitude for what we do have, let's commit ourselves to restoring the kind of greatness that we have had at periods of our time and that we can have once again if we tackle head-on this character crisis that we face. Let's resolve that we'll be a part of the solution, that we'll reach hearts and minds, spread the word, and make this country what it can be again. Make of ourselves who we can be again. Be the people we can be. And until next week, I'll leave you with that, and I'll join you again for another edition of Character Matters. Take care.